A mistake that people make is that generative AI is a tool to reimagine and reinvent your business. And it certainly can be that at some point.
Talk about how to make AI strategy actionable, measurable, and aligned with the business.
If you think about it, you had 8 different people in the group ask a question about like what's a go-to market strategy for X, Y, and Z. Same model, maybe even worded the same way. They'll get different things.
Welcome back to another episode of the Bridge the Gap podcast, powered by none other than Revenue Reimagined. Today's guest is Justin Trombold, founder and president of Antesyn Advisors, and one of the clearest voices on how enterprises can move beyond generative AI hype to actually build real value-creating strategies. Before launching Antesyn, Justin spent nearly a decade leading strategy work at Deloitte and Grant Thornton. He now works with leadership teams to connect the dots between enterprise objectives, market realities, operating models, and yes, AI innovation. We're going to cut through some noise here, talk about how to make AI strategy actionable, measurable, and aligned with the business you already run. Justin, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's great. It's great to be here. And now I have to live up to that introduction. So thank you for thank you for that.
The only problem with
kind,
my
but,
intro is
yeah.
we do try to like lift people up.
Yeah.
You earned it, man. You earned it. You've done some good stuff. Dale, welcome to the show.
Hey, I'm back. Having technical problems, but now I'm back. Although I did have my eye dilated today, so I can't see a thing. So this should be interesting. But Justin, welcome to the show. Appreciate it, man. You talk a lot about AI hype, enterprise reality. When you were building your organization, what problems are you trying to solve for the biggest firms that they don't even know that they have yet?
Yeah, it's a great question to tee it up. And I would even, before I answer that, say that one of the things that generative AI has done is a lot of the problems that large organizations have, small organizations have the same ones. They just might manifest in slightly different ways. So there's been kind of a condensing of what that looks like. But to answer your question, the main challenge that I'm seeing that's showing up and what leaders or even individuals anywhere in the business aren't seeing is a presumption that a tech solution in terms of generative AI is going to solve what your challenges are. But what really the mistake they're making and what they're not seeing is that you have to have clarity around what it is you're trying to solve and then align the technology solution to that. And oftentimes that isn't going to be an out-of-the-box solution. And so you, as an organization, you have to have a culture in place that is able to identify those opportunities.
You mean you have to like actually document the challenge that you're having? You have to identify where you can potentially solve it?
I feel like we just had this conversation 10 minutes ago.
or even document processes. So there's a common thread that, you know, what do we mean if an organization's customer first? It's like, well, what it doesn't mean is you have it on the side of, you know, a thing on the wall at the company. Maybe you have that, but that's of course not sufficient. It means that you are able to dig in and unlock the customer's value chain and understand what it is they're trying to do. And you organize a company around delivering that, right? So that isn't just, hey, this is a feature on the product. It's how you work internally, how you reward your people. So they're doing activities that are customer first. It's how you then explore opportunities and examine the customer value chain and think about the impact on the customer value chain if you make a decision. Similarly with generative AI, so that's a core principle that's been around for a long time. We have these things that we do. And back to your question, Dale, a mistake that people make is that generative AI is a tool to reimagine and reinvent your business. And it certainly can be that at some point.
Yep.
But you probably don't want to start there. You probably want to start with, well, what are we doing now? Where can we improve? And then how do you make a concert, as you know, Adam, you had with your great introduction, how do you put in a clear path to then identify those opportunities, test them, decide if you want to scale them, and then make appropriate investments.
Yeah.
Then you can start getting into this idea of, well, what now? And I'll just close on this here. The what now could be, well, now we're 20% more efficient. Can our salespeople, again, anybody that has some value adding activity that's being, let's say, squeezed by mundane day-to-day things, what of those things can you do more of, right? So that can lead to growth. It can lead to other revenue advantages, can lead to innovation. But I think something that's interesting, and time will tell how this plays out, is if you just give your people more time to think about things and not do things, what types of transformative business models are going to emerge? What ideas will people have that are working in the business that we're spending so much time there? And they had ideas that occurred to them, but they just dismissed them because they had to get back to the spreadsheet or whatever they were doing. It'll just be interesting to see how those dynamics emerge in the coming years.
Yeah. So let's piggyback off that. So in order to solve these problems, and in order to make sure that we are fixing the right things, whether it be generative AI or not, for the record, those strategies have to be deeply enshrined and connected to how companies operate. And you have said often that most AI strategies fail, quote, because they're disconnected from how companies actually operate. And Dale talks about this quite a bit as well. Give me like a concrete example of what you mean by that, and how we actually solve that problem. Because I agree, people now are like, oh, I'm just going to bring in some AI to fix this problem. Well, yeah, what's the problem? What are the results? Like, what are you doing?
Yeah, well, let me frame it up, and then I'll give an example on that. So where that statement originated from is when we were conducting some research on what makes organizations generative AI ready, and two main themes emerged. There's a concept of a high level of generative AI readiness. So these are across categories like, is your generative AI strategy aligned to your enterprise strategy? Sounds simple enough, but probably quite hard to do. Is end user proficiency where it should be? Is there a level of collaboration that's in place? Do you have characteristics of scalability and
I'm going to interrupt you for 1 second. What you just said is key. Do you have characteristics of scalability and adaptability? You can't just bring in AI and expect it to fix something if you are the very red taped, very structured, it has to be exactly this way, and we never adapt from anything organization. And we've seen this time and time again. We had a client who is very rigid, but let's bring in AI to fix everything. Well, no, because now you're going to complain, like you're too rigid. Can you adapt? Can you be scalable? Can you be flexible? What's your appetite for things going wrong? The mindset that people have, and I'm curious your thought on this, we see it all the time, of I'm going to bring AI in and it's going to fix everything. Listen, dude, I don't know what to tell you, but unless you know what you're trying to fix, how you're trying to fix it, how to prompt, what the outcome is, what the input should be, you're just going to replicate bad, and you're going to make it 100 times worse.
Well, and this is where I'm going to answer your question, but I'll say that within that level of readiness, there's high variance in how organizations, we call them, there's 4 or 5 or 6, depends on, we had some different ideas, but let's just say 5 personas within each of those categories. And to that example of the risk averse group that may be very process oriented, very rigid, there's a line of sight for these different types of organizations that you would be more likely to generate value from generative AI. But you just have to be careful about where you make those investments, right? So you wouldn't want to, in that example you provided, you wouldn't want to bring in something that was, or experiment with generative AI solutions that are rapidly transforming the way you're doing business. What you may want to do is leverage that rigidity and that governance to come up with some very well-defined processes and think of some safe plays that you can put into place that are more augmenting the people. So you can be judicious there. And so that's to the quote that you had shared. When you're talking about the question that you just asked in terms of, well, what does it mean if you just plug something on top of what you're doing? Those personas give you a starting point in terms of saying like, okay, let's maybe not play here and let's play here. It gives you a directional roadmap for now. But for every company, it's taking that step back and either going into the business and having your people define processes, or if organizations do have more centralized either centers of excellence or generative AI functions, and they want that to come from the top, they have to be very clear of what it is they're solving for first. Now, the challenge that those groups will have is that, as you said, people in the group won't know what they are. They won't know how to use them. They have to not just engage their people in the ideation, they have to engage them in the actual development of, or identification of where those pain points are, and development and testing of the solutions, right? Because then not only have you figured out if there's something worth solving, but then when you make that investment, your people know what it is. They know how to use it. They know how to think about the data outputs. They know I should expect efficiencies in these ways, and now I can improve the way I work in other ways. And so regardless of how they show up, this taking a step back, identifying problems at the lowest point in the organization, executionally or strategically, and then layering the solution on top of it, engaging the people that are going to use the solution or digest and act on the information is critical.
Yeah. And if you get down to like the basics of defining the process, understanding where your challenges are, and then identifying what a human should do and what a machine should do. And then like, it's almost a skill. Like there's a set of skills. There's this concept Anthropic just put out on not doing it from an AI agentic perspective, but doing it at a skill level. And they're starting to deploy these skills that agents can then pick up. Okay, I need to go do a prospecting skill. That has a series of things that we do. Now we're getting into like the micro execution of a human, what a human would do, so that we can give the right instructions to the right part of the agent to go do the right thing. And that is just, it's very monotonous, to be honest with you. It's like just very, it gets down to like minutia level that I think people have always struggled with. We do go-to-market strategy and execution for many companies. Forget about prior to AI. And it was hard enough for them to say, okay, what do you want to do first? How do we drive an ideal customer profile? How do we drive a value proposition? And all of those integral little pieces that you have to run and execute on. Like it was hard enough to document it at that point. And they're like, well, AI can just go do it now. So you're putting bad process into generative AI. And what you're seeing is just a really shit process coming out much faster. So we're just getting worse process faster.
Well, and I'll tell a story. I love what you said, Dale. And I was working with a small organization, and a big part of what they wanted to improve was their ability to analyze geographic markets and understand if it was an attractive place for real estate investments, and in what way, commercial, multifamily, office, mixed use, whatever the asset class was. And the question came up of, well, could we just find a company that creates a market analysis generative AI tool? And the answer is yes, you could. And would it be wrong? Probably not for what the tool is trying to do, but it might be very wrong for what you're trying to do in terms of your organization. I think we all can appreciate that if you have decisions to be made about, even if, let's say, it is a real estate tool that you bought, but what makes an attractive investment could be very different for one organization to another. And if you're like, are you someone that does acquisitions or partners, or you're looking to develop the asset? There are all these variables, plus the criteria of what makes something attractive could be different. And so if you went in and took the time and said, let's get our hands dirty in a nice private instance of an LLM, and let's start exploring how we can unpack market attractiveness, take the time to sit down and document it. Like, what does that mean? What are the drivers of market attractiveness for us? And you build a tool, then you go and have that discussion with the company that can build an agent for you. Now we've got a good fit. We still have the caveat. Let's assume that this output is something that a really good analyst would provide. Let's still think about it. Let's still add that element of decision making. But you get something that's not only much closer to the right answer, but your people know what it's deciding upon, and it just helps drive decisioning. And there, I'd like to say there's a close to
you're
that
on
story.
Mute, Dale. You shook your head and you talked, but we didn't hear you.
They're
I totally
still
agree.
figuring it out.
My dog was barking.
Yeah, I was just going to say to your listeners, there's maybe hoping there'd be some close, and they did it and they lost. They're still figuring it out, but I think that first step of like, hold on, like you've got to think about it this way. And perhaps there's a time where that becomes less true, where the agent can also be the agent and it can figure out all those things automatically. We're not at that time yet. And once we get there, then we'll have to have another conversation, because that's a whole nother dynamic. But we are still at the phase where that input and that understanding of what the process is, what the analysis looks like, is a critical predicate to then putting agentic solutions or any solution together.
So let's shift a little. Let's talk about how you design, the generative AI ready enterprise. So you co-authored a white paper that was called Generative AI Readiness. What does AI readiness actually look like? And we've talked about this a little bit, but if you were just going in, you're giving a high level talk with a, enterprise level organization. Here are the 4 or 5 things you need to do to be ready for generative AI. What are those? People buy from people. That's why companies who invest in meaningful connections win. The best part? Gifting doesn't have to be expensive to drive results. Just thoughtful. Sendoso's intelligent gifting platform is designed to boost personalized engagement throughout the entire sales process. Trust me, I led sales for a Sendoso competitor, and I can tell you, no one does gifting better than Sendoso. If you're looking for a proven way to win and retain more customers, visit sendoso.com.
Yeah, let's start. I'll just do a process answer, then we can talk about characteristics if we want to go that way. So you need to understand where you are today. And where you are today means, and it doesn't have to be with our diagnostic, of course, but taking a step back and saying, how well do we actually have a cohesive generative AI strategy? How good are our people actually? Are they well equipped beyond? And it doesn't mean that they can query it. Like, do they know how to apply an LLM in a business context? How equipped are your leaders to digest the information that's produced from an LLM and act upon it? So that the proficiency. There's the collaboration. How siloed are you? Do you have a track record of everybody keeping their own data and marketing, not talking to IT, not talking to whomever? So I'm talking boring, like that's a bad thing, just for your listeners. if that's that'd be a low readiness situation. The scalability and adaptability. Do you have some characteristics that, let's say as an example, when you've made tech investments in the past or major investments in the past, does the enterprise follow through with them? Is there value creation that typically comes from a change in the way of working? How good is your organization at change management? How clear are your governance processes? And it doesn't even have to be for AI, but just in general. Are you good at setting up governance and then following it? So starting with understanding that. Once you understand that, then you get that sense of what you can do today, what you can't do today. Then on what you can do today, that's where you follow that pathway of engaging your people all the way up to making an investment. What you can't do today, that's where you set the long-term roadmap of, hey, we're a really poor collaborative organization. We have a very good, well-defined generative AI strategy, but what do we need to do to break down those silos? And so you get very targeted and you say, let's change these things. And so that's where the change management and transformation comes in, which is very, very hard. For an organization of one, that's hard. And it gets harder every N+1 all the way up to whatever it is. Put those changes in place, and then as you become more proficient, revisiting what you can do and how you can execute it. So that's, from a process standpoint, what that looks like.
And so it's interesting because a lot of what you were talking about sounded very academic, right?
It does.
And so you started your career as in academic research, so that makes a lot of sense. How does that academic research background shape your approach into a business strategy?
Yeah, and that was I love the question, because what was a big learning curve for me was taking that academic principle
Mm-hmm.
and putting it together in something that's attainable. So the first part of that discussion, where I was describing what does readiness look like, you got the win now, win later path,
Mm-hmm.
and then it's about diagnosing and improving. That's a very academic answer, and it's a very hard thing to do. And so what I came to realize, and what we realized in our group, is that not only does it make more sense for our business model to have a more achievable outcome that doesn't require transformation, that isn't this like academic exercise. That's where we came up with, well, how does that manifest? How can we put a process and help organizations put a process in place that's more real, which is that idea of defining processes, empowering your team, having a clear way that you show if something works or not. How do you scale? How do you invest? That's where because if you unpack those processes, it brings in characteristics from that diagnostic into a very real world pathway, right? So what we found is that larger organizations are perhaps better suited to going the more academic diagnostic thing first and really figuring out where the problems are and fixing them. Smaller organizations or business units are better suited to starting with that. Okay, well, what do we do tomorrow?
Right.
And what do we do the day after that? So it's a marrying between the two. And I would say that consulting in general is afflicted by the same type of thing of, leaving the deck behind, right? And you have a nice framework to think about something, but you don't actually have anything that you can execute. So it's overcoming that idea of, yes, it's great to talk about principles and academic exercises to illustrate points, but that can't be what you're offering a client. Right. There has to be some meat on the bone.
Yep. Totally agree. And they have to understand how that translates into metrics and profit. And that's why a lot of times where we like to build like an AI charter, kind of like what you're saying, like what does it look like across everything? Yeah. And then you take like a proof of concept proof point and say, okay, let's execute on this and see where we generate return on it. We end up going a lot in the go-to-market because it seems like that's a good place to get a return, because you have high spend resources doing low end tasks like research or prospecting, that kind of stuff.
Well, and I think that's I talk with clients a lot about fear, and what I see with organizations that are, we'll just say they're heavily reliant on front office activities, or that's, their business model is very focused on being able to sell or whatever that looks like. Let's not worry about a direct solution that generates revenue, talking about generative AI. Let's just identify those things that are constraining your people from doing those high value activities. Let's make those more efficient. And then you have more time. And it doesn't mean that it's easy, but it's something they can wrap their head around, and they have a starting point. Yep. To say, let's totally have our people doing more of what they need to be doing.
Yep. Totally agree.
Go ahead, Dale.
Wait, you're not gonna participate in this episode?
It's funny to me because I feel like we talk about these things all the time, and people look at us sometimes like we have three heads. And a lot of what you're saying, Justin, is not only do I feel it's right, but it's validating. And Dale, I know you probably feel that way more than I do, because you typically are talking about this much more than I am. Where people just feel like, oh, come on in and start AI, and everything you're saying, I feel like we've been trying to, pound into people for the better part of 6-12 months. And people just don't get it. When you look at the future of AI, the future strategy, so things are changing, right? Where do you see, and I might be putting ourselves out of business with this question, where do you see the role of consultants, strategists? Like, how do we all evolve in a world where AI could generate insights instantly. I'm curious your thoughts. Then I'll give you mine, because I actually had a prospect say to me the other day, "Oh, well, I could just put all this in ChatGPT and get the same thing."
Yeah.
Good luck, but I'm curious your opinion on that.
Yeah, I think, outside of the idea of saying, let's try to convince that person that they might go wrong by doing that, I think if consultants or professional services are honest with themselves, and I have some good data to back this up from speaking to clients of professional services firms, there is a very real threat. People aren't, at least in concept, right? You have this dynamic to where you have very expensive engagements. You have teams and pricing models that don't necessarily match the effort and deployment models that are possible. You have these new entrants coming in, and they aren't just boutique nobodies. They're your constellations of people from really great consulting pedigrees that are, I think the popular thing now is the consulting model, the monolith model or something like that, where there's essentially a AI analyst on the bottom, or like an individual, and there's like one of those, and then there's more of like an engagement manager than the senior person, and they're bringing this very dynamic, very quick, less expensive go-to market product. Those aren't really hitting the big players yet, but clients are starting to expect that. And so what I expect will happen is that there'll be a bifurcation where the organizations that can really differentiate on strategy, and that is they have the expertise to come in and provide that experience and those insights that can be augmented by generative AI or brought to life by generative AI. They're going to continue to win, although perhaps at a lower price point. And then you have organizations that are, let's say, your scale players, your larger consulting firms that do a bit of everything. I think the organizations that become really, really effective at orchestrating the business strategy, the transformation, and the tech ecosystem in this collaborative market are going to be the winners in that space. And they're going to take a lot of that business. And then you have perhaps people like us that are coming in. I think we'll have the same, we have a bit of an advantage in that, we're small and can go in. And I don't know if that means we can crack the Fortune 500, but perhaps you can start cracking business units at large companies.
Do we want to crack the Fortune?
Or do you want? Or do you want?
That's a whole separate conversation as well.
But it's gonna fragment the market. There's gonna be some really big winners and some names that persist, and then there's gonna be a lot of new challengers, either 3, 4, 5 person shops, or 100, 150, 200 shops that have a lot of expertise, and it's probably going to get more and more specialized in terms of what clients are expecting.
Yeah, I fundamentally agree. I think one of the things that we have said from the beginning, before AI was really big, right? So we're coming up on our 3-year birthday, so to speak. We often get asked, well, how many hours do I get for XYZ thousand per month? And my answer is always the same. Like, we don't trade time for money. We trade outcomes for money. And we have become very AI forward and AI focused. And I'll give you an example. We have a client that's never hired a BDR before, never managed a BDR before. And I put together, Dale, you keep me honest, a fairly complex BDR onboarding program, complete with like the workbook, the calendar, the 18 resources you're going to need, the certifications, et cetera. This historically would have been a massive deliverable in a sprint that would have taken me 10 hours a week for 4 weeks to build. It literally took me, if I'm being generous, 3 hours. A lot of back and forth, but a very AI forward approach. And certainly, people would say, well, I'm going to pay you the same amount of money to do that in 4 hours as 4 weeks. You should be thrilled to pay me to do it in 4 hours, because it means I could go do something else for you. Yeah. So I think when
they can do something, they can start advancing that, whatever they're trying to do, right? There's a value in that speed.
100%. So I think that, consultants and agencies and clients who are not leveraging AI the right way, which is not, to be clear, going to ChatGPT or Claude and saying, write me a cold email sequence, or using some bullshit prompt. That is where I see the future going. And I see that, Do I think that people are going to be able to go use AI to replace all of us? No, because you still need the execution. You still need to be able to operationalize it. Like, great, you get this output from Claude. Well, what the hell are you going to do with it? And that's where the operators come in. I think more and more what we're going to see, historically, we've seen people who have worked with other consultants who have given them a pretty slide deck that has been garbage, that then come to us and ask us to fix it. And I'm happy to take that business all day long, by the way. But what I think we're going to see now is people who are like, I tried to do this with Chat GPT and I couldn't figure it out, and now I need your help. And I think part of the business is going to shift to showing them how to use AI the right way.
But it's all strategic thinking. Like the whole thing, like the iteration back and forth. It's like what I'm realizing is we need a mindset shift as individuals to I interact with the machine as I would interact with a human being to get answers that I would want out of a human being. It's not like create me this thing and then go take it. It's like create me this thing and then like look at it and be like, okay, this is good, this is not good, this needs to modify, and iterate till, from your perspective, in the knowledge that you have, that you feel comfortable with it.
Well, I think the great analogy is that everybody has questions, or everyone has problems. Not everyone has good questions. And so I think the consultancies, the advisors, whomever, even within a business, the individual in a group that knows how to ask the right questions, and at least at this stage knows, as we've been talking about before, knows how to engage tools to help answer those questions. And that's not such a simple process. And I think Adam, with the idea of using ChatGPT, that deluge of information, what I would call low confidence information, that's not going to lead to more action. That's going to lead to more confusion, because there's going to be all these different, it's just, if you think about it, you had 8 different people in the group ask a question about like, what's a go-to market strategy for X, Y, and Z, same model, maybe even worded the same way. They'll get different things. They'll have different opinions. And is that better to have 8 different perspectives on a go-to market strategy? So there's a value in precision and asking and answering the right questions, and using generative AI as a tool to help facilitate more rapid, more accurate answers to those questions.
Yeah.
So the firms that can do that, I think, are gonna win, or at least win insofar as we can predict how any of this is going to play out in the coming years.
It's not going away. It's just going to be different.
Yeah, it's going to be different. It's going to be an interesting ride for sure. With that, we are almost at time. Let's dive into some rapid fire. Here's the rules. 10 words or less. Otherwise, for every word that you go over, Dale owes me $10. So feel free to talk as long as you want.
Adam just loves rules. He
do.
never followed.
I am a rule-driven person. It is black.
You're a rule follower, but
I am not a rule follower by any stretch of the imagination.
If I go under, Adam, do you have to pay Dale $10? Yep. So do we have?
There you go.
Yeah, I mean, typically. What's the one KPI that you see executives over-index on?
Revenue per FTE.
Interesting. I like that one.
That's a new one. I mean, it's not a new one. It's new that you said that's overhyped, but it'll be interesting to see how that plays out.
I wouldn't say it's overhyped. I would say it's very useful, but applied indiscriminately.
Yeah, fair point.
So it has to be thought about in the right context.
What is your go-to AI productivity tool today?
It's nothing sexy. I like Grok.
Oh, okay.
I know it's not.
It doesn't have to be sexy. That's the one I haven't used, to be honest.
I was thinking of an application that I've been particularly satisfied with. For your listeners, I use it a lot because it doesn't do as good of a job with generating beautiful text, but it's very good at collating information. So the Grok Markdown table is very good if you have content that you want to organize and put into Excel or something like that. It does a nice job with that.
Good to know. I'll have to try it. What's the most overused word in AI right now?
You took our jobs.
I was going to say agent.
Or you didn't. But yeah. Another way I could think about that is I think artificial generalized intelligence. And I think that's damping down a little bit of late if we're being in real time here. But that to me, we alluded to it a bit earlier, but predicting what to do in an environment like that it's incomprehensible, I think. So you almost have to pretend like it's not going to like something like that won't happen anytime soon. Or at least that's my approach to it.
One piece of advice for leaders chasing AI transformation too fast.
Slow down. Think about outcomes.
I like it.
Love it.
Very important. I'm actually going to steal.
But I'll say this.
Go ahead.
Start. So you said too fast, but if they're chasing it too slow, perhaps start, but keep it deliberate and focus on outcomes.
Love it. I'm going to steal Dale's to wrap up the show. I'm going to play Dale for a minute. Last one, Justin. Favorite dream vacation destination? I couldn't even get it right.
You can't even do it right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that one's easy. So I think the Croatia and the Croatian islands. We were going to go there for my honeymoon, but COVID got in the way of that. And then now we have kids, so I don't know what the timeline is to getting back there. So that's something my wife and I have on our radar. Hopefully, it's at some point we can get back there.
It's supposed to be beautiful. We have friends who just went. We were supposed to go, but we didn't either for various reasons. Justin Trombold, thank you so much for joining the show. Enjoy Croatia when you get there. Thanks for all the great takes.
Thank you so much, guys. I appreciate it.
Justin.
Take care.